Hideo Kojima, the mastermind behind some of the most prolific games, with amazing storytelling and groundbreaking themes, is often cited as the man who predicted the future, a modern-day Nostradamus with the uncanny ability to read into what our existence entails. Many of Kojima's titles, aside from Metal Gear Solid, showcase elements that eerily mirror our world. But before diving into the unusual events and themes that have become true from his works, it's worth first reflecting on Nostradamus himself. While much of his work is vague and metaphorical, many cite predictions believed to have come true, especially from his book Les Prophéties, published in 1555. Despite the name, the centuries in the book don't refer to time periods but to the way he structured his writings. And bizarrely, centuries later, some of these riddles appear to have come true. For example, regarding the Great Fire of London, Nostradamus wrote, "The blood of the just will be demanded of London, burnt by fire in the year 66. The ancient lady will fall from her high place, and many of the same sect will be killed." In 1666, the Great Fire actually consumed large parts of London. While blood of the just is debated, many link it to those blamed, including marginalised groups. Another passage reads, "Within 2 cities there'll be scourges, the like of which was never seen. Famine within plague, people put out by steel, crying to the great immortal God for relief." Many say this relates to the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The destruction of these 2 cities, plague-like radiation sickness, and the apocalyptic aftermath are very eerily similar. Another widely interpreted quote is, and I quote, "From the depths of the west of Europe a young child will be born of poor people. He who by his tongue will seduce a great troop, his fame will increase towards the realm of the east, and this, beasts ferocious with hunger will cross the rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hitler. Into a cage of iron will the great one be drawn, when the child of Germany observes nothing." Many believe these lines refer to Nazi Germany and the tyrannical rule of Hitler. Whilst Nostradamus' writings don't actually confirm the existence of Hitler, the similarities are very uncanny nonetheless, and one can see how in the context of these writings could quite naturally make some people come to these conclusions. However, a lot of critics believe that it has something to do with the Latin name for the Danube River. Regardless, Nostradamus didn't write plain predictions according to reports. He used riddles, metaphors, and astrology-coded phrases. And it's this eerie vagueness that definitely gives his work its power, just like Kojima's. We fill in the blanks ourselves, and that's why his legacy, like Kojima's, lives on. Kojima's work really is often inspired by blockbuster films and, of course, mimetic ideas ranging across sci-fi and beyond. A lot of the times people will often argue that Kojima's ideas are often recycled from great authors behind some of his masterful works that include great narrative building and cinematic storytelling into a game format. And those people would be correct, but as Kojima often showcases, that often ideas pass through generations and continue to evolve. But what you guys are here for is to try see what Kojima predicted about our future, or perhaps maybe just understood that what the world was heading for. It was in Police Notes around 1994 that Kojima presented a sci-fi buddy cop detective adventure game that envisioned a leap in space exploration and human colonization, while revealing the social decay that still followed humanity and overall space technology and exploration. One of the darker themes is organ trafficking. Set in the mid-21st century, the game follows Jonathan Ingram uncovering a sinister organ trafficking ring on the space colony Beyond Coast. The colony, initially seen as a utopia, becomes a dystopia where corporate greed exploits vulnerable individuals, orchestrating disappearances to harvest organs within space, driven by medical demand due to the effects of space habitation. This mirrors real-world issues that Kojima has spoke about, that over the years has become more prevalent. The illegal organ trade is a massive black market industry. According to the UNODC, organ trafficking generates between 840 million and 1.7 billion annually, and is considered one of the most illicit and illegal trades, just under drug trafficking. Several organs are harvested, but kidneys are the most often harvested, typically from vulnerable populations, from corrupt doctors stealing organs, to pirates and rebels maiming victims in poor countries, to entire operations in failed states. For example, China has faced immense scrutiny for this. In 2020, 6 people, including doctors, were jailed for harvesting organs from accident victims by deceiving families into believing they had consented. Organ traffickers thrive in conflict zones, among refugees, or wherever the rule of law breaks down. Syrian officials estimate up to 20,000 organs have been sold since the Syrian war began. In Metal Gear Rising, we see this theme. Raiden travels to Mexico to investigate Desperado, a corporation who kidnaps children to harvest organs and replace their brains with synthetic ones to turn them into obedient soldiers.
All kids, like you?
Yeah, a lot of boy. But then me been over here what them skunt wanna do. Snuff us out. And got all the organ.
Send what you have now. I'll destroy any unharvested inventory.
Can? But have you any idea what they cost?
Last I checked, children weren't exactly rare in this part of the world. Millions of them, in fact. You can get more once we set up a new lab. They lead lives of hunger and pain. We're performing a service here for them and the cities they burden.
But just gathering the donors required a significant investment.
Yes, you'll get the money.
Similarly, in Death Stranding, still mothers are trafficked from Mexico and other places, and their babies are used for experimentation. Of course, in the game is to detect BTs. That is still considered quite unethical, considering what they have to do to practice these experiments. For example, the purposes really are just as horrific. Reports in Guatemala and other countries show how infants have been abducted or sold for unauthorized international adoptions. A chilling real-world parallel. Kojima repeatedly showcases child trafficking and abuse because he likely understands the corruption in the very industry he operates in. Some say he even tries to reveal the truth through fiction carefully to avoid being silenced, given on the higher elite class who own the industry. Consider the Epstein scandal, an actual trafficking network protected by wealth and political power. Young girls were trafficked, groomed, then buried in NDAs and sealed testimonies, until the dam broke. In Death Stranding, BB's infants from brain-dead mothers are used as tools, stripped of humanity, just as these young girls. It's a haunting reflection of Epstein's victims, treated as disposable, just like a lot of the victims in the world of police notes, ranging from adults to young children, all being harvested for their organs for the wealthy class to be able to live within space. Kojima does something unlike any other director, where trafficking is mentioned quite a few times within his games. If it isn't organs or people or child soldiers, Kojima tells us about confronting this horror that happens in the real world more than ever now. Just because something is legal or systematic doesn't make it moral. And just like anybody else in the general public who is liable to a fair trial and prosecution, and the same goes for our rich and ruling class that we call our leaders. A lot of crimes do get exposed, but people in responsible positions such as our governments and leaders are no stranger to committing these atrocities, who often take advantage of the legal system by using their wealth to avoid punishment. Kojima's broader Metal Gear universe deals with shadow governments, secret societies, and elite puppet masters. Epstein's ties to royalty, intelligence, and celebrities mirror the fictional patriots in many ways, who usually try to protect their own interest and power by silencing anybody who tries to expose them, or using media outlets to try to quiet down the narrative of their exposure. The same goes for the Tokugawa Industries, one of the wealthy, powerful families who run Beyond Coast from Police Notes. They are a wealthy elite family who traffic people and cut deals with the mafia in order to exchange certain goods, money and wealth, as well as organs. These aren't just video game villains, they literally echo reality more than we would like to admit. The question is, was Hideo Kojima trying to tell the audience something back then? Aside from the reports that everybody could access at the time, did he know something that we didn't know, that would eventually come to light in the future more than it ever has done before? In Police Notes, Tokugawa has absolutely everyone and everything in his back pocket, including law enforcement to cover his crimes. It's showcased in the game that Jonathan gets framed for a murder he didn't commit, showing the shocking truth of having too much power and wealth can destroy someone's life for the corruption of those in charge, including the influence that they have on the media and the impact it has on people's perceptions. It's only often until there's overwhelming evidence against them that things will get exposed, but usually by then the damage has been done.
昨夜、徳川グループ3代目、現徳川グループ総裁のジョゼフ・貞興徳川がナーク麻薬および臓器密売、殺人教唆の容疑で検察庁に送検されました。
As a part of the world of Police Notes, we see how the social dynamic and norms are very similar to our culture and society today, particularly in the West. Bear in mind, this game came out in 1994 and speaks of elements that resonate today. There's a strip club that's mostly occupied by transgender strippers who, as the protagonist explains, have undergone sex changes through genetic modification, which as of yet is considered not possible. Aside from being set in space, Police Notes also takes place in Los Angeles. Some statistics show that California has the largest transgender population, with a number of nearly 300,000. What's quite bizarre is that the protagonist mentions that the city of Los Angeles is quite famous for them, and through the idea of genetic modification, which as of yet in the real world is not possible. It's still considered an immutable characteristic. It is possible to change a person's outward appearance, including bodily features, but that doesn't mean it changes a person's sex on a genetic level as hinted in Police Notes. It's often determined at fertilization, genotype, and during embryonic development, phenotype. I can already feel the hate comments coming, but that's what science determines. I thought it was interesting to bring up because even people in that community would have to agree with that, and even if they don't, statistics have shown that transgenderism has been on the rise compared to a few decades ago, whereas now it's more widely accepted and has actually risen with certain people more comfortable with changing their gender. Maybe Hideo Kojima was really letting on to something that actually came true. Near the strip club there is a bistro, but in reality it's a front for a business that's selling child abuse content through virtual reality headsets. Another detail Kojima included that reflects a very real and current problem happening in our world today. Offenders are already using VR to groom young individuals and store illegal images of child exploitation. And with the rise of AI, the problem has only gotten worse, with AI-generated imagery and deepfake software now being used to create synthetic abuse images and videos. But perhaps the most notable theme of them all is the idea of space colonization, space stations and distant planets, something many have spoken about before Kojima, no doubt. Still, the depiction of humans someday living out in space is becoming more and more a possibility. We now see companies like NASA and the likes of SpaceX and Elon Musk's race to populate Mars. Kojima has warned of a society where even outer space really isn't free from the systems of greed and control that plague the Earth. And wealthy business owner and high-profile investor in Amazon, Jeff Bezos, has even spoken about a self-sustaining space colony, something eerily similar to Beyond Coast, that could one day allow trillions of people to live in near-Earth space inside a massive floating structure. Interestingly, Police Notes wasn't Kojima's first game that gave us insight into the future.
What's going on?
I've become a junker.
A junker? Gillian, but why?
Jamie, you know why. It's the only way we can regain our lost memories. Snatcher is the only word that keeps coming back every time we try to remember our past.
So the story of Snatcher revolves around a future where artificial beings, or snatchers, replace real humans and assume their identities. Replicants don't really just kill their targets in this game, they take over their lives, integrating seamlessly into society. On the surface, it reads like a cyberpunk detective thriller, clearly inspired by Blade Runner. But if we dig deeper, it's clearly a warning, a deep philosophical one about the erosion of truth and just overall identity. In today's world, we are already brushing shoulders with the concept, not through robots stealing our skin, but rather through AI, deepfakes, and identity theft at a mass scale. We're not exactly worried about metal skeletons crawling under human skin, at least for now. We're watching as digital clones of people are created, voices are mimicked, faces are forged, and false realities are spreading like wildfire. AI-generated videos can replicate politicians saying things they've never said. Voices of celebrities and even everyday people can be synthesized with uncanny realism. We've seen scams where people are tricked into sending money because a loved one's voice was cloned over a call. That's a snatcher, a false version of someone you trust taking their place and manipulating you.
Amazing what technology can do these days, isn't it? All you need are a couple of pictures, like the ones you share on social media, where they can be taken and used by everybody. I know for you these pictures are just memories, but for others they are data. And for me, maybe the beginning of a horrible future. A future where my identity can be stolen just like that. Where I can go to prison for things that I would never do. Imagine my credit score being destroyed, Dad. Or my voice copied to scam you, Mom.
Mom, I'm in trouble. I need you to send me money, please.
This becomes very highly dangerous because this can also sway the public opinion, especially in the political realm, in terms of the voting system. As artificial intelligence becomes more advanced, it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. Snatcher also subtly plays on the fear of mass surveillance, a big theme in Kojima's later games such as Metal Gear Solid 2.
The United States in charge, a pandemic treaty and amendments to the existing international health regulations that will remove the human rights protections currently embedded in the IHRs, will enforce surveillance, censorship, get rid of freedom of speech, require governments to censor and only push a single narrative.
In the game and the universe itself surrounding the characters is riddled with high-tech systems that monitor citizens and the public and the characters in the game, with nanomachines and other technological means, all under the pretense of maintaining their own will. Today we live under the guise of thousands of invisible eyes, satellites, security cameras, facial recognition systems, algorithms that track online behavior, and metadata collection. It's the same dynamic. You're being watched, studied, and predicted, not by sentient snatchers, but by systems designed by corporate and government entities with biased agendas. Let's not forget about the replacement of humanity itself, as Snatcher suggests. Kojima was warning about a world where humanity becomes quite expendable. The idea that's crept into our modern age with talks of transhumanism, the rise of digital consciousness, and the push to merge man with machine. You hear it from Silicon Valley elites, downloading minds into the cloud, replacing body parts with cybergenetics, uploading memories. It's Snatcher dressed in the language of innovation. Maybe a lot of people don't care to admit this, but it's looking like that we may just be getting replaced. Just like the Snatchers, eh?
Hey guys, check it out. We got one of those tin cans here.
Look at this little motherfucker. You steal our jobs, but you can't even stand up.
Another eerie connection is the pandemic in Snatcher. The game's backdrop involves a mysterious outbreak called Lucifer Alpha, a deadly virus that wiped out half of Europe's population 50 years prior to the game's event. But in the game, it's been bioengineered to wipe out humanity for the big replacement. Does it sound familiar? Decades ago, let's just call it CV-19 to avoid censorship, Kojima envisioned a future shaped by a catastrophic bio-event that leads to heightened fear, government control, and dependency on synthetic solutions, robotics, and AI to fill in for human loss. Some people believe that this is a form of predictive programming, where the subject will predict the future based on what they know will happen. Essentially, they're predetermining events that they know will come to pass, and often leave clues in movies, video games, and other forms of media. We'll get into that later on. If you don't want to wait, then just skip later into the video. It's interesting to note the spike proteins look very similar. Snatcher calls it SNO9. I know it's not a big connection, but it's along the lines. This isn't to say that CV-19 was bioengineered to be a weapon against the public, but in this day and age, who really knows? In the 1990s, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake on the MSX introduced a fictional algae-based fuel called Oilix. Kojima envisioned as an economical alternative to traditional fossil fuels. Decades later, the concept of algae-derived biofuels has transitioned from science fiction to a tangible component of energy. It's stated in 2024, the US Department of Energy announced an $18.8 million funding opportunity to advance research and development in converting algae into biofuels and bioproducts, aiming to reduce emissions in domestic transportation and industry. Additionally, the European Union initiated the Fuel Algae project at €5 million, an endeavour to explore algae's potential as a sustainable fuel for aviation and maritime sectors. Back in the 1990s, a fuel made from algae seemed ridiculous, but now it's actually shown that through research, using algae to create biodiesel fuel is definitely possible, and nations are beginning to mandate the use of an artificial fuel. I guess Kojima got something right here.
I stare at the stars and the sky up above and think, what am I made of?
So now we come to one of the most controversial games ever made, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Developed in the shadow of the late 1990s and released on November 13, 2001, just 2 months after the 9/11 event, the game became unintentionally prophetic. Originally, the final act of the story depicted a colossal mobile fortress known as Arsenal Gear crashing directly into Manhattan, tearing through the skyline and reducing parts of New York to ruin. Early concept footage, or rather a picture, even showed the aftermath of what looked eerily similar to the Twin Towers, with one still partially standing and the other gone. Konami and Kojima could have never predicted the horrors of the September morning that happened, but the timing was chilling. Whenever by coincidence or what some interpret as predictive programming, the parallels stirred controversy nonetheless. The destruction sequence was ultimately cut or altered due to the sensitivity of real-world events. Understandably so, you had a narrative where a rogue terrorist and AI sends a massive war machine crashing into a symbol of Western civilization. It felt too close to home. But beyond the visuals and the gameplay, what makes MGS2 prophetic is its message, a warning far beyond its time, especially out the entire series. This wasn't just a game about secret societies and conspiracies, it was a philosophical assault on the information age. A story about how truth, identity, and free will are often manipulated, not through guns or bombs, but through data. The core revelation of MGS2 is that Raiden's mission was never real. It was a simulation, an elaborate test to gather human behavioural data for an AI system known as the Patriots for the S3 plan. Their goal? Control the flow of digital information under the guise of preserving human stability. The AI explains that in a digicide society, triviality is power. The sheer volume of the content, most of it, is meaningless. Drowns out what actually really matters. When everything is archived, nothing has weight. And in the void, memes, not just jokes, but the units of culture and thought, are spread, mutated, and consumed without context. This vision is terrifyingly accurate in hindsight, because whilst the Patriots don't control content, they control the context behind our content. We live in a world where everyone has a voice, and yet no one is heard. Where misinformation spreads faster than facts and echo chambers from around every belief. Social media has become the battleground for digital identity, fueling rage, division and confusion and subreddits, you name it. We scroll through human tragedy and viral dance videos in the same feed. It's all flattened, all equal, As the AI says,
in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretation, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution.
And the AI's conclusion is that humanity needs a curator, an artificial intelligence that will decide what should be remembered and what should be forgotten, a living algorithm that governs memory itself. It's no longer fiction. Look around. Algorithms dictate what we see, what we buy, and what we believe. TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, hell, YouTube. The world is filtered. The age of curated reality is here, just like Metal Gear Solid 2 warned us. This game suggests a society where truth is selected, not discovered, where ideas compete like genes in Darwin's pool. Only most viral survive, and the most accurate, it ends with the haunting message.
No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
In a digital world where AI now generates news, filters reality, and even creates art, MGS2 wasn't just ahead of its time. It is our reality, and understandably why people have such a bad outlook on AI. It was a manifesto, a warning, a question. Who decides what's real in a world where nothing can be trusted?
I'll pick my own name and my own life. I'll find something worth passing on.
It's no longer about nations, ideologies, or ethnicity. It's an endless series of proxy battles fought by mercenaries and machines.
Metal Gear Solid 2 through 4 didn't just predict the future of AI and information control, it also forecasted the rise of drone warfare. Back in 2001, Metal Gear Solid 2 had unmanned flying cameras that were a constant threat. These floating surveillance drones tracked protagonist Raiden's every move, triggering the alerts the moment he was spotted, or, for example, taking pictures of Snake and branding him as a terrorist to the media. At the time, drones sounded like it was just pure science fiction, or in Metal Gear Solid, just an exaggerated piece of gameplay mechanic that was making stealth more intense. But now, drones are everywhere. What seemed distant and dystopian has become part of daily life. We've seen drones evolve from harmless consumer gadgets to invasive spying tools, delivery machines, and even autonomous military hardware. Today, drones can record you without consent, scan private property, or follow you silently across a city block. Some governments have even begun drafting legislation to regulate or ban their unlicensed use altogether, because they've become more than just toys. But the most chilling transformation is in warfare. What Kojima illustrated in Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, that was released in 2008, was not only prophetic, it was surgical in its accuracy. He imagined a battlefield ruled by drones, geckos, and AI-controlled weapons, mechanized ghosts replacing human soldiers, and today unmanned vehicles, whenever guided by AI or operated remotely, are standard tools in most global conflicts. We've now witnessed drone strikes with deadly precision carried out without or even ever setting boots on foreign soil. Wars are waged with minimal human presence, machines doing the killing, humans merely authorizing the command. Surveillance drones circle cities like vultures, while autonomous units patrol war zones across the globe. There is still a human presence in battle, but it's slowly fizzling away. And it's accelerating with robotronics. According to Business Insider, the drone market is exploding, not just in commercial sectors, but militarized ones especially. Countries are pouring billions into autonomous warfare systems, such as robotronics. It's possible the battlefield of the near future may not involve human combatants at all, just operators behind screens, overseeing machines that decide who lives and who dies.
AT Corps' unmanned bipedal weapons, officially designated Irving by the US military. They've spread like wildfire among the PMCs. There are more of those things now in service than tanks. They've got tough armor plating and are highly agile to boot. Your best bet is to stay out of their sights.
Unmanned. Pretty soon they'll have put living, breathing soldiers out of work.
Nanomachines.
Not just one kind, either. There are different types which will replenish the supply of adrenaline, nutrition, and sugar in your bloodstream.
Now I don't have to worry about food.
I also put some nootropics in there.
Say what?
Nootropics. A class of drugs which will help improve your mental functioning.
It'll make me smarter, huh?
What the hell does this mean?
I think it means you've been talking to an AI.
That's impossible.
The kernel probably isn't GW per se. GW was most likely stimulating cortical activity in the dormant part of your brain through signal manipulation of your own nanomachines.
So now we've got to talk about one of Metal Gear's most fascinating concepts, and that is of course nanomachines. These tiny pieces of tech are laced through the entire series, but it's really in Metal Gear Solid 4, I'd say, when we see just how deep it goes. At first glance, nanomachines are used to enhance the body, boosting strength, reflexes, even regulating pain and emotions, and actually fixing wounds. They're used to keep soldiers sharp and ready, like flipping a switch in the nervous system. But underneath that surface is something way more disturbing. In MGS4, this system is called the Sons of the Patriots, and it's not just for performance, it's surveillance at a microscopic level. Nanomachines let the AI overlords known as the Patriots practically monitor everything. Your heartbeat, your thoughts, what you eat, what you feel. They can control when you go numb, when you feel fear, when you're allowed to act. It's a system that doesn't just watch the battlefield, it pretty much controls it. It decides who fights, who dies, and who gets to think for themselves. But this is where things get a bit real, because in the world today we're starting to creep into that territory. You probably heard of Neuralink, Elon Musk's brain chip project. The idea is to connect the human brain directly to a computer, helping people with certain conditions to use controlled devices with their thoughts, or restoring senses like sight and hearing. And that's incredible, but it's also just the beginning of what potentially could become a problem. It's the kind of tech that in theory can monitor brainwaves and read signals, even write them back. You could adjust someone's emotional state, suppress a panic attack, or feed data directly into their memory. Might sound helpful, sure, but what happens when someone else has access to that? What happens when government or corporations start writing the rules for your mind? I think that's what Kojima was warning us about back then. It sounded like science fiction, like, some cool piece of tech, but now we're watching the pieces slowly but surely fall into place. We might not have abilities like Senator Armstrong turning his skin into steel or being able to live immortally like Vamp, but we're starting to see technology that alters what it is to be human, and really who gets to control that.
Foxdie is a type of retrovirus that targets and kills only specific people.
One of Metal Gear's most unsettling ideas in the game is a virus genetically engineered to kill specific individuals by triggering heart attacks based on their DNA, as well as other means, even using people as vectors to spread the virus. What makes it so haunting wasn't just the science fiction behind it, but the idea that something like this could actually exist. Now, whilst we don't have anything on the exact level of Foxdie, no virus that can perfectly pick off individuals like a sniper, we're not really that far off, because in recent years there's been breakthroughs in biotechnology that comes eerily close. There are now genetic editing tools like CRISPR that allow scientists to target and modify specific genes with high precision. On top of that, synthetic biology has made it possible to design viruses in labs, and while the intention is usually medical or fight disease or target cancer cells, the scary part is always potential for misuse. In 2017, there was a report from the US National Academies warned that CRISPR would be weaponized to target specific ethnic groups or individuals, and both the Pentagon and DARPA have invested millions into defense systems against genetically engineered bioweapons. And with DNA databases and surveillance on our DNA is growing thanks to the consumer services like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. It's now more actually feasible to map and identify the genetic code of individuals worldwide. If a government or group got access to that data, it could, in theory, create a virus that would only kill people with certain sequences, meaning that anybody who was a threat to the establishment could be eliminated without even being touched by a single bullet. Just something for you guys to think about.
And now, you're becoming a doomsday device yourself. I can't predict exactly how devastating the epidemic will be. Whether just 1% of the human race could unlock the broken receptors, or whether we all can. In either case, 3 months from now, you'll be a walking biological weapon.
Once there was an explosion. A bang which gave birth to time and space.
In 2019, Death Stranding dropped, Kojima's first solo creation after the public fallout with Konami. A game many at the time mocked as just a walking simulator, but if you know Kojima, you know nothing is that simple. His work tends to age like prophecy, confusing at first, sometimes frustrating, but eventually it hits different. He once said, "My games are rather stressful games, where you have to play for a long time," and Death Stranding was no exception. It told the story of a fractured society, one that had been pushed into isolation, a future hanging by a thread, where people lived alone in bunkers, terrified to go outside, the air itself poisoned by invisible forces, and in the middle of it all, Sam Bridges, played by Norman Reedus, walking the land to reconnect it one person at a time. Now here's the eerie part. The game came out before the world was forced into lockdown, before the pandemic became a daily word, before physical contact became a risk, before the streets were empty. In the game, the world's under attack from an otherworldly threat, timefall, a deadly rain that rapidly ages everything it touches, people live in fear sealed away, societies collapsed. But it's not about monsters, it's about disconnect, loneliness, the invisible weight of living apart. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? When COVID hit, people started looking at Death Stranding very differently. And Kojima noticed. He even apologised in an interview for predicting the pandemic. Kojima said he rewrote the plot of Death Stranding 2 because he didn't want to accidentally forecast the future again. So Sam suffers from phobia, a fear of physical contact. For many people, that feeling mirrored a very real anxiety, especially in the public. The fear of potentially catching the virus and being really unwell, and trying not to spread it to other people. It was quite an isolating and lonely time for everyone in every generation. People couldn't see their families or friends, in fear of it all. Just like how Sam feared the BTs, we feared something invisible in the air around us we didn't quite understand. So did Kojima predict it, or did he just follow where the world was already heading? But this is where it gets darker. Some believe Kojima isn't just a visionary. They say he might be connected to something much older, much deeper, something hidden behind closed doors. There's a long-standing belief about the 33-degree Freemasonry. It's the highest tier, an invitation-only level that's not just about rituals but real influence in society. Some say this group is connected to the Illuminati and the modern-day elites, those running the media, politics and even gaming, music industry, using symbolism and storytelling not to just entertain but to warn. It's called predictive programming. The theory says elites reveal the future events through fiction, music, films, games, and almost as a ritual of karmic cleansing. By showing us what's coming, even symbolically, they gained some twisted moral immunity. They gave us the truth, but we didn't listen. And in this theory, Kojima fits too well. His games are always seeming to tap into what's coming: AI, information, warfare, data control, pandemics, disconnection, emotional manipulation, and the erosion of truth. All of it. Years before the headlines. Then there's his Hollywood connection, Kojima's obsession with films, his friendships with celebrities, his ties with people who, let's be honest, operate in an industry long rumoured to be full of occult symbolism and spiritual compromise and corruption. In one promotional photo, Kojima poses with one eye covered. To some, that's not just a creative angle, that's the eye of providence, a symbol often linked to Freemasonry and the Illuminati, and going as far as Satanism, hence all the demonic activity that some people see in the music industry. The same symbol countless musicians and artists have flashed in videos, performances and album covers. And then there's the darker side of Hollywood itself, whispers of ritual abuse, power games, fame at a cost, the idea that the price for influence is silence or worse, compliance. when someone like Kojima, respected by the biggest names in film, continually drops stories that feel too close to home. People start connecting dots. Is he a part of something, or is he warning us in the only way he can? Maybe he's just a man with incredible foresight, or maybe he knows more than he lets on. Either way, the part that unsettles most is this: a lot of the fiction is starting to look a hell of a lot like real life. So what do you think about Kojima's wild foresight into the future? Was it brilliant intuition or something more? If you've got thoughts, theories, or anything I've missed, drop it in the comments. I pretty much read most of them, not all, but still. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and make sure to turn on the notifications because YouTube doesn't always like to push videos out like this. So that small click helps a lot more than you'd think. Anyway guys, thank you for watching, and remember, the future is only a second away.
There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.